Organizing ABC is the guide to protecting schools and communities from shale gas development. Here down below is the link for that, for protectourchildren.org, organizing ABCs. It will be coming out in print. If you would like a copy, you can find my email at the end of the presentation and get a copy for yourself. So this is the second thing that I had talked about. Why are we here today? Unconventional gas infrastructure is expanding into more and more communities, and what do we need to do to be effective in getting protections or stopping infrastructure altogether. Here's an overview of what we're going to be talking about. So we're going to be talking about how to prepare for the hearing ahead of time. Then Ryan Hamilton is going to talk about hearing definitions and legal considerations. Then I'm going to hop back on and talk a little bit about expert participation and testimony. And then Ashley is going to round it out with funding considerations, which is a hugely important element to bring all this home. So the first thing you need to do is prepare for the hearing. You do this by gathering information. So you sometimes will know that infrastructure is going in by, depending on what state you're in, like for instance, in Pennsylvania, they have the DEP that will send notices. And of course, in the organizing guide, we teach you how to sign up for those notices so you know ahead of time. But the municipality also should get a notice before the state knows about it, because the municipality is told, and in Pennsylvania that's called Act 14 notice, the municipality is told before the DEP is told. So that's really important, because if you can get out ahead of the game when it comes to the whole permitting process, then you can be more effective in your organizing. And for us, that means going and doing file reviews. So we go to the DEP, and we have to sign up like a month and a half in advance, and we scan all the files. And then once we scan them all and bring them home, we can have experts or other folks that know more than we do about these types of issues. We can have them look over the file. We can look through them, even in, as a person looking through a file for the first time, you can recognize things that might be wrong in a file or deficient, or just boxes that aren't checked, things that aren't filled out that maybe your Department of Environmental Protection did not see. So that's really important. And also you can gather historical and leasing data. So we can download and gain some of that online, but sometimes it's about talking to people. If you know of other people that want to pursue fighting this and opposing this development with you, sometimes they have that historical data, and they have some knowledge that might help. For instance, we had one farmer that was planning on using his farm that was passed down generations through his family for grass-fed cattle, and because the gas company used this really old lease, it was unfortunate that he did not even want this infrastructure on his farm. So sometimes just talking to people and getting to know people is a great way to learn how you can find information to oppose the infrastructure that's being proposed. You can go online. Another example is, we have one member that's really big into the mining history here in Southwest Pennsylvania, and she has a map of where the mines are and how deep they are. And so there were a couple well pads that were proposed that were in very big mine subsidence areas. And so that's one of the things that we were able to bring up at the hearing, because we knew about it ahead of time. And of course, then I think the last component is what does your local ordinance say? And kind of that's one of the starting points, because that'll tell you what type of hearing it's going to be, whether it's going to be a special exception hearing, or whether it's going to be a conditional use hearing. And so you can prepare and adjust your expectations of what's going to go on in the hearing based on that ordinance. And then elements of the ordinance. What are the performance standards? What are the words of the ordinance say? And how do maybe some of those words conflict with what's in the application? So all these little puzzle pieces are really important information, bits of information that will help you prepare for the hearing. And then hugely important, gathering resident support. So it's not often that you have a well pad that you're living in, a half mile from, that you might live a mile, and that this infrastructure is going to impact you. Maybe it's a compressor station, and it's going to impact you and your community, and you want to fight it. But maybe you're afraid that you don't live close enough. So one thing that's really important that we have done, and we've been really successful in this process, is gathering a membership base. So establishing that base and that resident support. So for instance, there was one community where there were 3 well pads proposed, and in this little hollow, and one of the residents, we went around and did some outreach, and the one resident said, I want to tell all my neighbors, I know them all personally, I can talk to them, and we'll all show up to the hearing. And then we had a big turnout at that hearing, because sometimes all it takes is one person, one neighbor, to go around and to help you do that outreach to get people to show up. So this is actually a picture of 3 sites. You can see the red dots are different sites that are proposed in our area. And so before these were proposed, we really didn't have a big membership base in this area. But after we did some canvassing, boom, all those green dots are actually members. Those are official members of our organization. So that gives us what's called standing. And Ryan's going to talk about that a little bit later, but I want you to remember that term because it's really important. And remember, this is how you get there. And I talked about, Ryan's going to talk about a little bit more, but it's important because you need to have people that live near the infrastructure that's proposed in order to be effective in your organizing and opposing this infrastructure. Because if you want to take it to another level, let's say it is approved, even though you've worked your hardest to make sure that it's not, you then will have the ability to move on with it. And Ryan can talk a little bit more about that. But when we started Protect PT, we had probably about 10 people in my living room. And now we have 170 members. And you can see all the red dots are proposed infrastructure. And you can see near each of those red dots are people that are in the green that are very concerned about that infrastructure and willing to stand up and fight for it. So how do you gain that support? It really depends on where you live. If you live in a more rural area, you might use different tactics like yard signs, phone banking, maybe a direct door mail service, so mailings. But in our area where it's really densely populated, we are very successful with canvassing. We find out that that's a really cost-effective way to get a lot of people out there. And usually we'll do one round of canvassing. We make these little door hangers. And then, like I said, we'll find like 1 or 2 people that are really interested in helping us and telling their neighbors. And they just take that cry of opposition to their neighbors. And then more and more people know about it, and the effort grows. Ryan's going to talk a lot participants, but we help prepare anybody that wants to help us participate. We have this little flyer that we put together with a call to action. It's always important to have a clear call to action to make sure you tell people what the dates are. And so we have what we call a zoning hearing board prep meeting. We'll send letters out ahead of time. We'll send postcards to tell everybody when the hearing is, because sometimes people just don't know. A sign gets posted on the property in Pennsylvania. They have to post a sign letting homeowners know. But that sign is on the property and it's pretty small. And if you miss it, you might drive by it, 20 times and not even see it. So it's important to get the word out. And here's some examples. And then I think it's really important to set a few realistic goals. Knowing that this is an uphill battle, you should go into it knowing that you are going to do your absolute best and knowing that you are going to fight your hardest. But when at the end of the day, we're dealing with a very huge industry that has a lot of tactics that they use to make sure that they can do what they want wherever they want to do it. So just knowing that you can gain protections, maybe your ultimate goal is to stop the infrastructure, and you should always work towards that. But also kind of keep in the back of your mind that part of your strategy may be to gain protections that without your participation would not be there. You can also use this opportunity to educate your community and build the movement, build your supporters, and gather those that support base. You can also delay construction. And there was a well pad proposed a quarter mile from my house, which is how we got involved back in December of 2014. And I can tell you they have half of an access road and a sign there right now. And they have not gone forward with construction because we're still actually appealing that ruling. They did get approved and we're appealing it. So it's not going forward until we have fought everything we can to make sure that we can stop it. And you can also stop it altogether. It's a very achievable goal to say, I'm going to stop it, because we've had some successes. We actually were successful with 3 different well pads being denied, one after another after another. And in the end, industry came back with some really shady tactics to make sure that those things, they could try to develop those things in the future. But the fact is, because of our efforts, these things were denied. And we've also gained a tremendous ground with gaining protections for our community. So next I want to introduce Ryan Hamilton, and I hope he can get on with his microphone. Ryan, are you able to get on?
Yes, I think, I hope you can hear me.
Yes, so just go ahead and tell me when to click through.
Great. Thanks, Jillian. I'm really glad to join in this webinar today. I've been practicing environmental and energy law in Western Pennsylvania since 2014. I recently started my own private practice, Hamilton Law LLC, where I do a lot of work representing citizens and property owners in addressing the issues that they face related to extraction industries like natural gas and mining. However, I've also developed a pretty significant practice representing citizens and neighbors in local zoning matters. For example, in Allegheny County, I worked with a citizen group to successfully challenge a proposed natural gas-fired power plant in a variance hearing. I've worked with citizens in Lawrence County to challenge a proposal to demolish historic buildings. And over the last several years, I've worked with Protect PT in Westmoreland County to oppose the unconventional gas well pads that are being proposed there in that community. So today, I'm not here to provide legal advice, but I'm here to provide some background information so that all of the participants and listeners in this webinar are ready to engage in that local zoning process. So with that, we can move to the next slide. And the first issue we're going to address is, where does the authority for zoning come from? In Pennsylvania, there is a state statute known as the Municipalities Planning Code, which generally governs land use and zoning. And through the state's police powers, this gives local municipalities authority to enact local zoning ordinances, which regulate land use in their community in support of public health, safety, and public welfare. Now, it should be noted that this is a voluntary process. So not every community in Pennsylvania, there are over 2,500 municipalities, not everyone has adopted a zoning ordinance. But where ordinances have been adopted, the first step is often to develop a comprehensive plan. The Municipal Comprehensive Plan is a planning document that the municipality, or sometimes several municipalities together, can create to identify community development objectives. This includes plans for land use, meeting housing needs, meeting infrastructure needs, community facilities and utility, plans for protection of natural and historic resources, plans for areas of growth, and for preservation. And once they've developed that planning document, they'll move on to enact a local zoning ordinance, which is the law that actually sets out specific standards for development in any community. And typically, a zoning ordinance is going to divide a community into districts, such as residential, agricultural, industrial districts. And the goal here is to keep compatible land uses together and encourage community growth consistent with that comprehensive planning document. But the local ordinance is also going to set standards for development, such as setbacks, height restrictions, noise and light standards, and it's going to provide a public process where certain types of land development, such as unconventional natural gas development, is going to present their proposed project to the community and receive approval. This is known as either, like Jillian mentioned, conditional use or special exception approval. And that is really the public process that we're going to talk about today. So we can move to the next slide, Jillian. There are going to be several different variations in the public process across municipalities based on the zoning ordinance that's enacted, as well as the specific land use that's being considered. But generally, they're all going to follow a similar structure, which requires first, advance public notice of the hearing. Second, an opportunity for citizen engagement in that process. And third, you're going to have a decision by the municipality. So there's typically some major key players that you want to understand who are going to be involved in this public hearing process. The first one is the applicant, who is often a developer or property owner. In many cases, in the context of natural gas development, it's going to be the exploration company or the operator, and they've submitted a written application to the municipality seeking some type of approval. The second key player is the municipality. In most cases, this is the governing body, also known as the township commissioners, or it could be the zoning hearing board. Often the municipality is going to be represented by an attorney who is their solicitor. He directly represents their interests. And the applicant, or the property owner and developer, is also going to be represented by their attorney. The third sort of potential key player that I want to address is the objector party. These are typically third-party neighbors or residents who have standing to object to the proposed development and who participate by cross-examining the developer's witnesses, presenting witness testimony, and participating as an objector party is the most direct and, in my opinion, the most legally significant way for citizens to participate. But residents are also permitted to provide comment as part of these public hearings. Public comment typically takes place when all of the other parties have finished their presenting their evidence. And public comment is important because it alerts the municipality to issues that they may not otherwise be aware of, like specific traffic patterns, historic uses of property, and specific current concerns of neighbors who are most directly impacted by development. Now, while just about any resident is going to be permitted to provide comment, participating as an objector party requires that you have standing, as Jillian had mentioned. Generally, standing will be granted where it can be demonstrated that a party is affected or aggrieved by an application. And this requires that they demonstrate a direct, immediate, and substantial interest in the subject matter of the hearing. So what does that mean? Generally, it means that you have to have an interest that is distinct from the interest of the general public in ensuring that the law is followed. You're going to demonstrate this interest through proximity, often an adjacent property owner or someone living typically within a half mile or thereabouts. It's also going to be through identification of harms directly related to the development. Overall, though, it's going to be a multi-factor test, and the board has significant discretion to permit a party to participate. So finally, I just wanted to note that just as an individual may have standing, an organization can also have standing if they can show that their members have a direct, immediate, and substantial interest. And working with Protect PT, that's exactly what we've done. Protect PT as an organization has successfully represented their members' interests in many zoning hearings. So the next slide. The next slide addresses what are the goals at a public hearing. And participating in zoning hearings is important for several reasons. First, it's a civic right and obligation to participate in the process. And second, this might be your only opportunity to provide input and potentially change proposed development plans. So for example, in working with Protect PT related to natural gas development, we've given neighbors a platform to raise their concerns, and we've coupled that with expert testimony. And our participation has resulted in significant changes to the status quo. For example, in one hearing, local residents identified lead contamination of soil on a site from historic uses of that site. And then later, our expert testified to the problems that developing that site would cause without addressing that pollution. So the zoning board conditioned their approval on the developer testing and remediating the site before proceeding. But there's two kind of main ideas that you need to keep in mind in any local hearing. First, the hearing is like a trial in that a final decision comes down to satisfying a burden of proof. And in a zoning case, each party has a separate burden of proof. The applicant or developer has the burden of proving compliance with the objective criteria laid out in the zoning ordinance. And if they meet those criteria, the application must be approved. On the other hand, an objector party has the burden to prove that the proposed land use is detrimental to the health, safety, and general welfare of the community. And if they do that, that's grounds for the municipality to deny the application. The municipality, whether it be the governing body or the zoning hearing board, is going to act somewhat like a judge, and they're going to decide who has met their burden of proof and what evidence gets submitted into the record. The record is important because this is the written transcript of the hearings, as well as any exhibits that are presented at the hearings. And this record is important because it's that record that the municipality's decision is going to be based on, and it's also that record that is going to be relied on in any appeal. So moving to the next slide. After we've held a public hearing, we've developed a record, the municipality is going to make their decision. And they typically have three options. They can either approve, deny, or approve with conditions. So for example, in working with Protect PT, we've seen the local zoning hearing board grant approval of well pads subject to conditions such as installation of sound walls, noise monitoring, air monitoring, vegetation screening, establishing an emergency hotline, and traffic coordination with the local school district. Okay, next we can move to the next slide. So once that decision, either to grant, deny, or grant subject to conditions has been made, the next step is that, or the most important thing to know at this stage is that any party that's aggrieved, whether it be the applicant or the objecting party, may file an appeal of that decision, assuming they have a legal basis for doing so. And that appeal must be filed typically within 30 days of that decision. The appeal generally will go to the applicable county court of common pleas, where a judge is going to review the record, listen to written and oral legal arguments, and then make a decision. And typically that local decision, the decision of the municipality, is going to be upheld unless it can be established that they made an error of law or abused their discretion. So I think it's important to know that your participation in front of the municipality is incredibly important because it's likely that that decision will be upheld. So before I wrap up, just a few takeaways. I want to note that first, this is a public process, and that means that you can and you should participate. And it starts with the public notice. So you need to know where those notices are published in your community and stay up to date on that. Second, I would just note that an attorney can assist to participate as an objector party, to demonstrate standing, to help collect and present evidence, to fulfill your burden of proof, to cross-examine an applicant's witnesses, and to ensure that a timely appeal is filed if necessary and warranted. So I'm sure there will be some questions that we can address at the end. But with that, I'll turn it back over to Jillian to discuss the next slides.
Thank you, Ryan. Okay, so the next thing we're going to talk about is expert participation and testimony. And Ryan talked about this a little bit. Every party has the opportunity to bring forward expert testimony. And so this record is really important to build at the local level, because like Ryan said, you're going to bring this to other courts if you're not happy with the decision of the local board. And so you have to have a really good record of expert testimony. So any one of those parties, be the municipality or the objector party or the applicant, can bring an expert. So what type of experts do you need? Well, it depends on what type of hearing it is. Who is your audience? Is your audience a commissioner or a township supervisor? Or are they zoning hearing board members? What is the background of the people that your expert's going to be speaking to? I think this is hugely important because sometimes the credentials of the expert and the personality of the expert are both equally important because, you know, like Ryan said, this is kind of, it's a quasi-judicial process, and so you want to have experts that that will really cater to the audience that they're going before. And what do you know about them? So what do you know about the people that are going to be hearing this testimony? And then what type of infrastructure is being proposed? Is it a compressor station? Is it a well pad? are there, maybe you need a health expert, maybe you need a land use and zoning expert. Let's say this is something that's proposed outside, let's say there's like a variance or something that's proposed outside of what a normal district, outside of what normally would be normally in the ordinance would be permitted. Let's say something is proposed in a residential district. And so maybe you want a local land use and zoning person to come and talk about why that's a really bad idea. Let's say you have mine subsidence in the area, and there's a local expert that knows something about that. Let's say there's a history of like Ryan was saying, lead or some other type of risks. Maybe a risk assessment expert would be necessary. So it basically depends on what type of area you live in, what type of potential environmental issues may arise as a result of the proposed infrastructure. And then what does this information tell you? So what does the local application tell you, the DEP and the local ordinance? All of these things, like I said in the beginning, the information gathering is the first step and going to be hugely important in deciding what type of experts you have. And then resident testimony. Ryan talked about this and how important it is. In order to prepare for resident testimony, I talked in the beginning about how we get people together before the hearing. We do this because we want clear and concise testimony. Sometimes these hearings can be quite long and quite boring, to be honest. And so if you have residents that come up and want to say something, and yes, they want to voice their concerns, but if you have residents say the same thing over and over and over again, it can become monotonous, and the board is less likely to be hearing the true concern and more likely to be tuning them out. So what we do that's been very effective is we have a meeting the week before, and we talk to the residents about all of their concerns, and we lay them all out on the table. And then we go through and say, well, who would like to talk about what? We make a list of who's going to talk about what, and we help them prepare speeches if they need help, or we give them the opportunity to and resources to do the research needed to make really clear and concise testimony. So this is actually an example of a hearing that we just had, and there were a lot of things missing in this application that would have violated the ordinance. And so what we did is we made a list of all of the things that were missing. And one of our residents came up and in resident testimony listed those things one by one, and as they were listing those things, people started holding up signs. I believe in this hearing there were around 21 missing pieces of information that we felt were important, that the board needed to look at before accepting the application. And so that was an important part of that hearing, because we felt like if we got a decision that we were not happy with, that or violated, in our opinion, violated the ordinance, then we would have that record built of the things that were missing in that proposal, and that would be in the record. Okay, so the next thing we're going to talk about is how do you pay for all this funding considerations. And we have Ashley Funk from Mountain Watershed, and she's going to talk about direct support funding.
Thanks, Jillian. All right, so I'm going to go over this a little quickly just because I want to leave time for questions. So my hand as well, or phone as well. So if anyone has any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about the Mountain Watershed Association's Direct Support Fund. So specifically with organizing efforts, so whether that's getting flyers out to your community to make sure that people know that a hearing is happening, or that there's a proposed well pad or compressor station, etc. Or if you want to do a mailing, etc. Depending on those different tactics which Jillian mentioned, you're going to need money to cover it. So what we run is something called the Direct Support Fund. It's funded in large part from the Heinz Foundation and the 11th Hour Project. And we cover these needs for small grassroots groups for organizing, outreach, education, and advocacy. And so this can go towards a number of different costs. I have these listed on the screen. So printing materials, t-shirts, etc. And these can really help make your participation at a public hearing really more impactful. So if you have a whole room show up and everyone is wearing the same color and the same t-shirt, that the whole time that you have this hearing, your public officials are going to sit there and they're going to see you, and they're going to know that there is a big group supporting your initiative. And that's really important. And I know that here in Pennsylvania, we have been seeing one of the local gas companies stand outside and hand out gas supporter t-shirts. So we really need to do what we can to combat this and make sure that they know that there is a whole movement that does not support this industry. You can go to the next slide. So just a little more detail. So this fund is specifically for those within the Marcellus Shale region, which is pretty much the Utica expanse as well. So largely Pennsylvania and Ohio, and it's intended to support small grassroots groups who are getting off the ground or have budgets less than $10,000, though we do have some wiggle room there. And we strongly prefer applications requesting $2,000 or less, but other larger asks are also considered. And I do want to point out that we have talked a lot about legal action, and this fund isn't for that in particular, because legal expenses can be really high, and it's just not sustainable for this type of funding to go towards that. That being said, we have funded expenses related to the legal process. So if that's copying transcripts from hearings, which can cost a lot of money, or sometimes an expert witness. For instance, if you are able to secure an expert witness that is a big part of your organizing strategy, that you can get a lot of people to come out and hear and listen to speak, and it's kind of an educational event too, then we would consider that as part of this fund, almost as like a speaker fee. So that's one of the ways that we can use this to help support those legal expenses. We've also had groups use Direct Support Fund to host a fundraiser or something along those lines, which is also an educational event, so that you can help get more interest in your group and help raise money to go towards those more expensive legal fees. And so more information can be found at this website, which I have linked below, and feel free to reach out to me after this with more questions about what can be funded, etc. Oh, one important thing, we consider applications on a monthly basis, and typically it's by the end of the second week of that month. So for instance, this month it would be by Sunday of this week, we would accept the application. And so that's happening. So we're really here to help support these initiatives as they come up. All right, I'll turn it back over to you, Jillian.
Great. Thank you, Ashley. And I just want to say, when Protect BP started 3 years ago, we started with direct support funding. So it was a big part of how we got going. And, right now I wouldn't say we're nowhere near a big 501c3. We're a very small 501c3, and we have much more funding than we used to. But we started really, really small with, like I said, 10 people in my living room. So it's hugely important that these funds, these resources are out there for you. And so, please use them and contact Ashley. If you have any questions about that, you can also contact Ryan if you have any other questions, and we are going to, or if you have any questions for me, you can contact me, and we're going to open it up to Q&A. It says, how about a Maryland? Fracking has been banned, but there's a lot of gas infrastructure project proposed. So yeah, I mean, even if fracking is banned in the state, you know, like Maryland or New York, you still could have related infrastructure. And so one thing that I would encourage is find out, like I said, start gathering the information, find out what the use is within the district, and then go from there. And if you don't see that there is an ordinance for some type of infrastructure, you know, you as a resident can engage in that process and propose that the municipality writes an ordinance. So that's one thing that you can do to participate in that process. So Shelley asks, does anyone know if there's a comparable group in the Northwest that funds groups like ours fighting this in Ohio? I don't personally, but there are several Facebook groups that I'm part of. You know, maybe somebody there would know, or Ryan from Halt the Harm. Halt the Harm is a great network that helps connect folks all over the country, like in this webinar today. So I would maybe contact him, and maybe there's a leader in your area that's been fighting something that you can get in touch with. There's a comment, what did the signs say? And that the folks were holding up during the hearing. Oh, okay. So we had each sign said a different part of the missing process. So for instance, DEP approvals were missing. So it said missing DEP approval. There wasn't an adequate hydrogeological study, which is required by the ordinance. So we said missing hydrogeological study. There wasn't a traffic impact study, so missing traffic impact study. And if you want any more information about that later, I'm happy to pass those resources on to you. And oh, thank you, Ryan, for putting the halttheharm.net up there. Shelley is okay. There's a right. Any other questions? Pull open. Yes, I can. Is that better? The problem is I can't see the I can't see the questions and the slides at the same time. So this is part of building the national network to stop fracking. Is this what you wanted, Ashley?
Oh, I just meant our contact so that people had something to go off of. I can pull up some of these questions
Thank
too.
you.
I'm looking. Yeah. So one of the questions is for Ryan that has an upvote too, and it seems that the Pennsylvania laws greatly favor the oil and gas industry. Are you concerned that every defeat we sustain sets a new legal precedent that makes it even harder to move judges in our direction?
Hey, this is Ryan. I can jump in and try to respond to that. I mean, I think, you know, whether your case sets a precedent and whether that's a good precedent or a bad precedent is always something that should be taken into consideration. But I think with strategic lawsuit in Pennsylvania, we're going to see the law start to favor those citizens and residents who are speaking out against this type of development. You know, it's hard to imagine, but the law moves very slowly. And in Pennsylvania, we've really only seen unconventional gas development really start to spread across Pennsylvania in the last several years. So I think as those cases progress through the courts, we're going to see that law change, and I'm hopeful for our future.
Awesome, thanks. Any other questions that are coming up? I'm trying to look through here.
And Ashley, while you're looking through, I just wanted to mention something. One of the reasons why I felt that it was important for us to get together and have this webinar today was because, you know, when we go to court to challenge something that was fought at the local level, and we go to court, lawyers, one thing they do is bring up old case law. And so they bring up case law of where residents maybe didn't, or a judge didn't feel that residents had standing, or you know, something was missed. And so hopefully this webinar will allow you to look at the hearings a little bit differently and prepare better. So then if you want to challenge it at a higher court later, you will be more prepared and your record will be really solid. And that will help everyone, because everyone coming after you, if you're successful, everyone coming after you will have that much more ability to be successful as well. And I think that's really important to note.
All right. Does anyone else have any other questions they want to get answered before we wrap up? Because it is around 7:30, just after 7:30. Have we had any successes? Erica is asking, and yeah, with an appeal process in particular.
So Ryan, do you want to take that?
I can jump in. So, you know, I can't speak to every case that's been challenged in Pennsylvania, but there have been some individual successes here and there where residents or neighbors have challenged development, and that success typically starts with the local municipality supporting those residents and, you know, denying the proposed development where warranted. I think as, you know, municipalities start to learn more about this, as they start to build their arsenal of tools that they can use to address this, I think you're going to see more municipalities who are more willing to stand up for their residents in the face of this type of development. And I think that's how we're going to see some real change and some real success in this process.
Thanks. And I know with our group, for instance, in Elizabeth Township, not too many months ago, we had a success through an appeal process where the commissioners effectively denied a proposal for a zoning change in order to accommodate a gas-fired power plant. So that was one I can think of off the top of my head. But this is a long process too. That we're keeping pushing, but I think every little thing that we do does help in some ways. One question that someone is asking, I think for Jillian in particular, is how do you define membership, Jillian?
That's a really good question. And actually, we talk about that a little bit in the organizing guide. I believe it's section F. But we define the difference between members and supporters. And I don't know, Ashley, I think there's a delay. Maybe you can you mute your microphone at all? Or it wasn't, oh, it's better. Okay. So we define members as individuals that live in our community, and we don't, because we know that some of these impacts don't know municipal bounds. So, you know, someone might live in a neighboring community and still be impacted by infrastructure in a community next door. So we define a member as someone who makes, because we are a 501c3, makes a small donation of dues, and then they are a member. They give us their information. They may participate in meetings. They may come to our educational events. But just by making that small donation, they become a member of our organization. Like Mountain Watershed also has a membership process, and we try really hard to support all of our members and fight anything that our members and we decide is really going to impact our community in a negative way. And somebody had asked about successes. In fact, in our community, before Protect PT, about 20 years ago, there was another group that fought a power plant going in near the school, and they won. And actually, one of our members, our board members, was a member of that group as well. And that actually, the zoning hearing board approved that, and they went to the county, and it was upheld, like Ryan said, it normally is upheld. And then they went to the state, and it was reversed. So I think it's really important to note that sometimes you won't get the traction you might be hoping for at the local level, or maybe even sometimes at the county level. But we currently have 4 appeals at the Commonwealth level, and we're really hoping to be successful with those. And we have a challenge to the ordinance. So because we feel like we had all of our ducks in a row, we felt like we had a good opportunity for success for those things. So we were able to pursue those.
Awesome. So some of these later questions are, I think, big topics to get into, and I want to respect people's time, our local group. So many good questions too. What do you want to do, Jillian?
Well, I mean, we could stay on for another 10 minutes, and if anybody wants to get off, they can certainly do so, including presenters. And I just want to thank Halt the Harm for helping us put this together, and the tremendous work that they do promoting these types of events and helping folks in all over the country with the harms of fracking and related infrastructure. So thank you, Ryan. I hope you can hear me. And thank you to Halt the Harm. I just want to also mention that we're going to have another webinar in a few weeks. It's going to be a social media webinar, how to use social media to really to help with the outreach of your organizing. It's hugely important. Katie Edwards from Clean Air Council will be on to help us navigate some of this social media. And so please stay tuned you can go on to Protect PT's website or our Facebook page, or it'll also be on Halt the Harm's, or I'm sorry, it'll be on Protect Our Children's Facebook page. And you can find out more about that webinar. That's going to be May 30th, so it'll be another webinar Wednesday. So thank you all, and I'm happy to stay on another 10 minutes if folks have questions.
Yeah, and I just wanted to point out one thing that Ryan said was that some of these questions can definitely be turned into topics for future webinars. I know I see one about fundraising and getting more into the legal process, and definitely that can be used in the future.
Yeah, that's right. We have the whole organizing guide, so definitely go on the organizing guide, request information through Protect Our Children, and we can do other webinars for any of the information in the guide, because we have all these great organizations that we work with together to bring this information to local residents, and hopefully we can build this grassroots movement and be successful. So do you want to go with another question, Ashley?
Sure. I'm just not sure if the people are still here. I can maybe while we have Ryan here, someone keeps asking, hold on, let me find it.
Okay.
Oh man, lots of chats. Okay. This one, someone keeps asking about the exclusionary rule. So when the oil and gas industry says that the municipality's industrial zoning is not large enough, the exclusionary rule is mentioned. Can you explain how strong of an argument based on the exclusionary rule is?
Sure. So I guess just as background, generally in zoning, the exclusionary rule generally states that you can't exclude any particular land use from your community. So in some instances, that's a positive thing if you think about it. For example, we want to ensure that everyone in our community has access to housing. So you can't exclude low-income housing from your community. When it comes to oil and gas development, the issue is whether the municipality has provided sufficient access to that gas with their zoning, and how strong that exclusionary rule argument is going to depend absolutely on the specifics of your zoning ordinance, the specifics of your community, and probably the specifics of the natural gas that's available in that community. So what I would expect that we see as this conversation and debate continues, as legal challenges continue, and as the industry's technology improves, I would like to see a world where this type of development is limited to small industrial zones, and they're able to access all of the natural gas that they need to from that location. So I think we're going to kind of see how that plays out in the future. But right now, today, it really depends on the specifics of your community and your ordinance. I see another question about the area available for a well pad. Typically in developing, kind of a standard unconventional well pad, you're going to see an area of land disturbance from 15 to 20 acres. That includes an access road and the well pad and any EMS controls in itself. But the well pad itself, when it's complete, might only take up about 5 acres. So that's just to give you some dimensions to think about. I think Lois makes a really good point there about updating the oil and gas zoning ordinance. Aside from vigorously participating in these public hearings, I think the most impactful and meaningful thing that you can do as a community is to revise or update your oil and gas zoning ordinance to either limit where it's being allowed in your community or to set more significant standards for protecting, the health, safety, and welfare of those residents who are living nearby. So you can reach out to your local legislators in the municipality. You can petition to change that zoning ordinance. And I think that's a really impactful thing that you can do right away, even before gas development comes to your community. I see kind of a follow-up about templates. I think that Protect PT or POC have probably collected some good ordinances. And if you want more information about that, feel free to send me an email or reach out to Julian.
Mountain Watershed actually has a resource on zoning in particular. Not necessarily a template because it gets tricky with templates in particular and what you can give to people so that it can still uphold, uphold your zoning ordinance to a challenge. But I can put in the link here, our resource to our rapid response resource center, and we have a whole zoning resource that talks about a lot of the different protective language you can use in your zoning ordinance to help prevent the different harms of with fracking.
So I'm going to put that resource in right here for you all. hope that's helpful. Are there any other questions before we get off? Thank you, Erica. Yeah, I want to thank Ashley and Ryan for participating. You know, it's really great that we can bring people together and provide resources to folks all over the place. And thank you, Ryan, for putting it together with Hope and Harm Network. Thank you, guys. So I think that's our cue. If folks still have questions afterward, you can feel free to email us. I'll put that slide back up on the screen in case you can still see it. And we're online. We're also available by email, and we have phone numbers there as well. So thank you all for participating. I hope this was really helpful and helps you to win some of those public hearings in the future. So thank you, guys. Bye, Ryan.